Right. So for the NEBOSH National General Certificate, the risk assessment project, we would have covered part of this on the previous session, right? So we could refer to that as part one. So you are required to do your project on as close to as a real company as possible, in that the details of the company have to be based on facts then, right? I mean, you can't do it from memory because it is the time of the pandemic. We mentioned that last week. So you can't do it from somewhere that you worked or somewhere that you studied before. If you do have like a family owned business, and again maybe sort of like a good size one, like a hardware, uh, a grocery, right? Something like that. I mean, it can be done on that, right? Once you have work taking place then. And it might not be, like I said, when I say work taking place, it don't have to be current work. If you may have been doing something with construction, um, and that was something that you remembered. So you can't do it from there anyway. But the idea is that you do it from a real, base company anyway. Let's have to admit someone there. And you can, like you can make up another name. We had discussed that last week. You can change the name if you wanted to. For those of us who working and stuff, fine. If you're working and then this is not an issue, you can use your own company. And those who are not working, remember, you can use a place of learning like a school, right? That you remember going to anyway because schools are closed, right? And you can get it going there, right? So you need to give the name of the organization. I'm just going through the left-hand side, right? The site location, we spoke about that last week, and ready to add a little bit more to that. For example, to say maybe where, in this case here, where Leicestershire is then, for example, like, I guess, in the UK, of course, right? So, but again, you could probably do a better description if you probably research it a little bit. And those of us, again, who are here from Trinidad, that you can discuss the area that you are in, the number of workers, you can give a male to female ratio, general description of the organization. Male to female ratio means how much males and females you have. You can't even give the age, right? You could give like a range of the age grouping, maybe from 24 years, 21 years to 60 years, etc. Right? General description of the organization. I'm not going to read all of that. That was in part one, but you can take a read of it there. I did mention though that a key part of that would be on the activities, right? I know the face is a little bit blocking us. I'm going to move it to this side, right? I did increase the size of the writing, so that's what would have happened there. So the activities is sort of like the main thing here. You also need the working hours of the business, as well as any shift pattern that is very important for them. Description of the area to be included in the risk assessment is where you sort of zone down a bit into the area that you want to cover, and you could also mention the areas that you would not cover. Again, I'm adding on some persons, right? So I'll just keep talking behind the scenes there. So if the risk assessment does not cover like an office, as what you're seeing here, then you have to say something like that. And to the end of this, you say who has the ultimate responsibility for health and safety. Let's try to put this on top, right? Yeah. So who has the ultimate responsibility for health and safety? I think we had mentioned normally that is not going to be a safety officer, but it's more like a safety manager, right? So you'll find that here, you may be tempted to say safety officer, but it is really the officer would normally have to report to someone, right? So that is what you'll find here. The finance director then, who reports directly to the managing director, has direct responsibility for health and safety. This piece of it here is known as the methodology. Um, Again, you should probably have a look at part one to this, but it almost seemed like the couple of them that I saw this week was still leaving out the main thing or one of the main pieces here, right? So should probably start at the beginning here, that here you have, like, how would you go about doing the risk assessment? You're going to have to use research. So you see the person would have put in the HSG, sorry, but just from the HSC guidance here. You need to put the website, and you can source a textbook if you wanted to do that as well. Um, then you have to do, like, or say that you are going to do um, like an inspection then, right? The inspection is what is going to help you identify the hazard. So here you're going to find a couple of methodologies. You're going to find like an inspection. If you read through this, and we did this last week, you'll see like talking is like interviews, and you may even look at company documents and stuff like the accident book, etc. Right? But somewhere in this you have to say, and I pinpointed that line last week, that you have to say that the reason for doing the talk, then talking to the workers and the inspection and the company records and stuff, is a way of assessing the company's controls to see if they are suitable. And if they are not suitable, then you will be using the research information here to propose a way forward, right? I think that may be somewhere in the last lines here anyway, right? So if I can pick that up somewhere, following the inspection, I referred back to the notes I made during the inspection and the sources of information that I had already reviewed, which is up here, to help me decide on any additional control measures or actions that were needed. And I could probably add a line there to say where gaps exist in the current controls. But they did something that's somewhere here, right? If you read it through, you'd see they mentioned something about adequate and stuff like that. So that have to be made mention in the methodology. I think I drew 3 boxes in the last session today, saying that you almost have to know where you are at, then where you want to be, and then how would you get there, right? So you'll find the research information will tell you like what more controls you will need, and you need to use it, right? These websites here should not be for a fashion then, right? These websites, I said these because sometimes you have more than one, because you may have, more than, of course, it's 10 hazards you have, but it's not like 10 websites you want to put. It's just like one or two as an example. But when you reach the table here and you are struggling for further controls, that is where the guidances come in, right? When you look for what further controls are required, that's what they were saying here, that they are going to use the information that they got. It's not lining up as I do it that fast there, right? To suggest additional controls. So that's where this will come in here. Let me just stop at anyone at random. You see, they have like 12 further controls here. But where did all of this come from? It can't sometimes come from your mind alone. It has to come from what you research, right? So that is something you need to look out for, that if you are finding yourself then like with limited further controls, well, some suggestions, sorry, would be to use the textbook, but then some suggestions would be to go and research the hazard you're looking at and then how to control it anyway, right? So I want to stop at anyone. I didn't want to repeat the first one. It may be a bit boring, so we can go to this one. In terms of a hazard, you want to give about 10 to 12 hazards. The guidance says a minimum of 10, so minimum means you can't do more than 10. So you will give your hazard category, which is slips and trips. You're going to give the hazard, which is what you are seeing, to say slips and trips. All right, so the hazard is what you are seeing, is like what is real in front of you. We have spillage of oil and motor fuel, obstructed walkways, trailing cables, etc. Here you go on to say who could be harmed and how. The how is very important. You need to bear in mind that when you review this session, and the one from last week, because I'm still reviewing, that the how is not the consequences, right? Some people say, well, the consequence, sorry, the how is cuts, bruises, muscle strain. That's not the how. That's the consequences. So if you read this, you see they didn't just stop at cut, bruises and muscle strain, but he went on to say from tripping over cables or tools equipment left in the walkway or on wet surfaces. So this is how the person could have been harmed. This is what is being done already. The main thing here to remember is that you must indicate that these are not adequate, right? You must indicate that these are not adequate, right? If you don't say that, the obvious comment could be, well, then why do we need further controls? You'd only need further controls if you said that these things are not adequate. So let me read one for you. Designated walkways indicated by yellow painted lines. Now, if I was writing this, I would have said designated walkways indicated by yellow painted lines, but not all the workers may stay on the safe side of the line, right? I mean, a line in the ground, if you work in a company, there's nothing preventing you from crossing a line in the ground, right? So I would say something like that. So, but some workers, would cross the line from time to time, and then that may lead to the fact that they probably need like a barrier, like a chain or something, a chain type barrier instead of the line, and then that would be the further control, right? Good housekeeping, mechanics know to store unused equipment in the designated area. Now, if this is true, again, like I said, this is my take on this, then why are we still having spillage of oil and motor vehicle, well, fuel then, right? Then this is not true. So you can say that generally, so this could be rewritten. Generally, housekeeping is of a good standard and mechanics know to store unused equipment, etc., in the designated area. But you can still say that maybe trainees may leave, open containers or, fail to close containers, which result in spills from time to time. So these need to be, I think, rewritten a bit because some of them have it, some of them don't. I'm telling you really from the examiner's perspective. Let me just add someone there that you have to indicate if the current controls are suitable. If they are, you'll find that there's no need for further controls here, right? Like this doesn't make sense. If it's good housekeeping, why do we need a system for random housekeeping checks to be brought in? These two things does not make sense, right? If you had said good housekeeping, there would have been no need to go and check at random there housekeeping. So here needed to say housekeeping, or there's a fair degree of housekeeping, but it may not be the best, right? So these, I just showing you one here that the examiners would have pointed out to, that these things don't make sense. You must say how it is then, and then, well, how could it be better? And it would only be better if it wasn't good enough. If this is good housekeeping, then we should not have seen anything with housekeeping on this side because it would have been good. Anyway, we made mention of that in part one, and I just sort of repeated another one there using an example from NEBOSH, right? We need to start today's work though, it's already, I don't know where the time does go, right? So this is what they call part three. Again, if you have any, remember just as what I did there, you saw something on the guide that was actually not too accurate. Don't want to say accurate, right? But it wasn't too accurate there. So you can never tell. If I see something as I go through this, I may add something to what you are looking at. For example, things like the age and the location and stuff. So it's a good idea still to have a pen around you anyway. I did have a read of this. It did seem fairly okay. Anyways, when I start going through it now, if there's any nitty-gritty things that is being left out, I would let you know. But the one we just saw, I don't think that was something minor. I think it was something that is cause of concern that you have to say, the current controls are either good or fairly good or not that good or bad. And that's why you are going to suggest further controls, right? So in a synopsis, right? I try not to use the markers yet though, but in a synopsis, you could listen to this anyway. This part three is really about 3 to 4 pieces inside of this. right? I would say 3, but it's not. How they have formatted it here in the format for the last 4 months, it's probably safe to say 3 because one was inside of the other one. But how they have done it here, they have sort of taken out one. You can just look and you'll see. So you'll see here that you see it's really about 4, but this used to be inside of the others anyway. So the first piece is a moral and financial arguments for all sections, sorry, for all of your actions. And if you look at it, there's a lot of words, 350 to 450 words, right? So that's a lot of words there, right? Just adding someone again. Yeah. Right. So yeah. So that's a lot of words, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But we're still talking about the format of it, right? Then we have specific legal arguments, 100 to 150 words, and this used to be up there. That's what I said. It was 3, right? Moral, legal, and financial. But they have given it, well, a new format anyway, right? I'm still seeing legal here, and I think we need to mention legal here too. But how do you have this format? The format that I could go down and show you. Some of you all see it. Legal is a part of the left-hand side then, right? Or it seems to be legal twice, which is making it look like 4, right? So they have legal here in each action. Action 1, there is the legal, there is um, the likelihood and severity, and then you have the controls, right? I'll come back to that in a bit, right? So just try to appreciate. I said this sometimes is the hardest piece though, but I mean, if you have the sample really, it's just to follow the sample. Sometimes the explanation make it look harder than what it is, right? So you have to talk about moral, legal, and financial arguments of why the company should remedy those hazards. We'll talk about that in a bit too. And then what you are going to do here for these actions here, what they want here, so I'll go slow with this one. What they want here, they want you to pull out 3 of your actions, which will be the further controls on the table. You can pull out any 3. It is advised though that the 3 actions come from 3 different hazards. They don't have to, but to make those word, to make up those word counts, how they have like every section have a word count. So for each action, it's probably best to take out 3 controls and 3 different hazards, right? In the format 4 months ago, students had normally combine them, but then they had to double up on the word count on that section then, right? The way it is now, how I showed you just now on the format, each action have its own sort of format on the table, right? So it's best to take out 3 actions and 3 separate hazards. Again, you don't have to, just remember that, but if you do choose 2 actions from the same hazard, then it's almost as if you have to follow the column then or follow the table again, right? Not sure if you understand that when you go down, you'll see it in a bit. But let me go to the actions that they're talking about. So what do I mean by take out 3 actions? Well, the 3 actions is going to be from this column here. Remember, this is the column. I have to go all the way back up for you to see the heading. Right? So remember this column here, right? The third from the last then. This is the further control actions column. So they want you to take out 3 actions. And when I say they want you to, but it should not be at random. It should be that these are the most important actions, right? It's not just to choose any out of the blue that, oh, well, out of the blue then, I was going to say Vike. But again, that is I guess a local balance anyway, right? Or a local term anyway. But it's not to choose any 3 out of the blue, but it's to choose 3 urgent action. It's like the most important ones. And again, just try to see if you understand. They are going to come from different hazards, right? So this is the screen I have up. I don't want to turn too much. I wanted to see the heading though. So let's say I was going to take this one, which I don't think this is important, but I'm just saying if this is one, you are going to have to fill out, when we go down to the table and everything, and they fill out the columns with this one, and then you are going to use back all of this, the month, the workshop manager, and you have to say that this action is going to be chosen from the hazard that you got it, well, the hazard that was just linked to. So if we say revise system for moving vehicles around the workshop, that is the action you want to talk about in the end. You have to sort of put in brackets that is linked to safe movement of people and vehicles. And you want to do that 3 times. So then this action is going to be linked to this hazard category. So that's 1. We have to do it 3 times. You're choosing 3 of them. So sort of doing where you can see the heading in the table, right? So if I say this one here, I'm just making this up. Again, you don't want to choose the minor action. You want to choose the ones that could save lives, then the one that are high risk, right? So let's say I chose checks need to be made that all lifting equipment is marked with safe working load. If I choose that one, we're going to have to talk about this month that we put here and who is responsible for it in a bit. But we're going to have to say that this is now linked to work equipment, and that will be the second action, right? So you think you get the idea this time, if you understand that there. Before I go back down, as I have the screen up, anybody have any questions? So you want to choose 3, and the rest of columns are filled out with that. However, we do have to talk about moral, legal, financial before, but I wanted to show you the main emphasis here was to choose 3 of the actions. You're going to link it to the hazard category, and you follow your table based, because they do have requirements there. Once you choose that, you can start working from there anyway. Questions on this, anyone? The questions do help clear things up sometimes for people who may not be.
Yes, sir. Morning.
Yeah, morning.
Out of the 3 actions, you said the one that would be most advantageous would be chosen. I didn't quite hear that part.
Yeah, the 3 I want to choose is the 3 that is like the high risk one then, right? So of the 10 hazards or 12 hazards you have, I've just stopped my screen here so you can see the headings now. So if I say further controls, we're taking it from here. So let's assume that work equipment was like a major hazard on the compound then, and housekeeping wasn't. Then you want to choose, or you may want to choose something from there. But out of all these actions I have here, the person have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sure if we go down, we'll find some more, right? Well, 4. So out of these, you want to choose the one that would actually solve the problem then, right? Or eliminate the hazard. So if it was falling equipment and or components, we just want to choose one action in this category. But we have 4 actions here. So you have to make up your mind and as to which one could solve the problem of fallen vehicles and or components, if you had decided to talk about this one in particular. So yeah, you are going to not just choose the first one because it was the first one, but you'll have to think about it. Which one of the actions could save a life? Which one could reduce the risk? And that is the action that you want to take to part 3. Anybody else?
Thanks.
Okay, but we're going to part 3. So let's, again, going back, right, way down. So let me try to just link that first, as that is what, well, the main piece of chapter 3. Part 3 is all about. But we'll have to come back to moral, legal, financial there in a bit, right? So what I was saying, just in terms of format, what you'll see is then each one, don't know what has happened to my screen. I'm not seeing anything there, right? Yeah, so each one of the action is dealt with separately then. You see here, justification for action 1. And just look at the format, right? And then remember, the rest is just to follow. You follow the legal, you follow the consequences, the likelihood and the severity, you follow out how effective the action would actually be, right? But it starts out by you choosing the action there. If I can read this one here, this action came from purchasing a mobile bridge to allow mechanics to be able to to safely access both sides of the inspection pit when working at ground level. And the hazard category here is work at height. So here you have what the action was. This is something that they would have taken out from that third to last column there. And you see they put in bracket here, it's linked to the hazard category, which is work at height, right? So let's look at the format, right? Admitting folks, right? So these things do crop up in the middle of the thing. And I was trying to do that before too, right? Just, don't know, I guess Janet is not getting on there, but seem to be another student as well. Yeah, so that's justification for action one. That's good. I'm gonna just appreciate the format a bit. So after that is finished, hopefully I didn't go too far there. You see justification for action two. Here they have enclosed area to be set up for sanding, grinding operations, including a suitable local exhaust ventilation system. So this is an action that they chose, and they chose it from is hazardous substances. And again, you fill out according to what the left hand of the column having it here, right? And then as you go down, you're going to see justification for action 3, right? So again, that's just in terms of the format. It's 3 actions you have to pull out. You're going to link it to 3 hazards. Notice the person here did actually choose another one from hazardous substance. Nothing is wrong with that, but I was saying that you're going to have to fill these things out again. And I mean, when I say again, it probably is going to be a different law and a different likelihood and stuff anyway. So nothing is wrong with choosing 3 actions from 3 different hazard category, or in this case here, the person did, I think, 2 actions from hazardous substance, and they may have been something else, I think. I'm not able to follow through with this. This was also hazardous substance. You could, I mean, if you have it home, you could follow through with it. Right, so this was work at height. So there was 2 from hazardous substance and 1 from work at height. The point is you can mix it up a bit. You can choose 3 actions from 3 different hazards. You can double up if you want to, but it doesn't make the work easier because you still have to fill out the format. And when I call the format, this is what I'm talking about, these kind of table columns that they have, right? The justification for action 1 doesn't mean by choosing 2 in the same that's going to be less work. It still is, you have to fill out what I call the left-hand side of the requirement here then, right? So tell me if you're okay with that, if you saw that format and you understand that was the 3 actions that we would be taking out, and how we would be, well, for now, formatting them on the table, right? We have not really done the left-hand side of the requirements as yet, but just wanted you to appreciate it was 3 actions, and you can choose those from any combination of your hazard categories. They say they can all come from 1 category if you want. I don't advise that because remember you have 10 hazards. I mean, there must have been something else that you want to talk about. Yes, you may want to talk about hazardous substances there, but must have been something else that was urgent then, kind of like a first, a second, and a third. And maybe first and second, maybe 2 of the hazards are that important, so they tied for second, which is why they have 2 there for hazardous substances. Right, any questions? We are going up to the first piece that we sort of did leave out because we're trying to link the table to this part 3 format. So this does start off though with you having to discuss the moral, legal, and financial reasons for taking actions, for all actions, right? So you'll have to sort of zone down on the actions that you take, and you are going to talk about moral, like a moral reason. This would be from lesson 1 or 2 that we did. You know, like why should a company remedy the hazards that you are seeing? So this paragraph would have that here, right? You could save me some time, like I said, if we don't read all of it. And I know everybody here would have been present for the moral classes. If you read it, you'll see it talk about things like lives being, you know, lost, I guess, if you avoid that, long-term injuries, right? So basically what we had done in moral, like the moral duty of care of the employer to the employee, you could mention that. You could mention things like society's expectation. You could use your notes there. right? And like, why should the company remedy the hazards that you have identified? Financial would be sort of like direct and indirect costs. If you notice, you can use some of that here. You can see financial impact could be broken down into three categories. You can say direct and indirect. You don't have to take the same thing here. You can say cost could be direct and direct cost could be, like the cost to damage equipment or medical bills, and indirect costs may be things like what you're seeing here, like damage to the reputation of the company. And um but they didn't have much, they did it. I mean, this seems to be like direct cost here. I'm seeing injured workers, sick pay, all of this seems to be direct anyway. Infrastructure costs, right? So you go through all of that, and we did mention all of these here. Fees for intervention, right? That is a cost, which is payable to the health and safety executive for material breach of the HSW Act. You have to use your notes. You can mention things like the company could get a notice, the improvement note. Just try to see how detailed it is. If you notice that they put the improvement notice and they went to give on some specs for the improvement notice, right? Enforcement notices, improvement work will continue. If it is the prohibition, then the work will stop, right? And so they went on to talk a lot about cost there, direct and indirect. And then I did mention here that there is some legal in here as well, right? So if you jump down, you'll see some legal stuff here. So you could start to mention a bit of the laws here as well, even though you could have probably expanded it on the format that they have. They do have legal here. The organization could also find that civil claims from workers made ill by their work activities could be made. Remember, civil law is law. Law is broken up into criminal and civil. So you start seeing some civil law here. Some of these claims may be made some years after, and then they talk about compensation that can be payable and stuff. So in a nutshell, this section have the moral, legal, and financial arguments in it. Not too much legal, but there is some legal. I would at least start the legal here if it is even saying a breach of the HSW Act, which they did not do that here, but you could do it here. The management regs and stuff like risk assessment wasn't done. And notice the word count in this are telling it is a bit. The word count here is 350 to 400 words. So the only way really to get those amount of words is really to talk about moral here, legal. Sorry, they didn't do legal here. Sorry, they did legal at the end. Financial here was a good bit, and then legal at the end, right? I didn't check the number of words there, but I guess that is what we will see there, right? So moral, legal, financial arguments are all actions. Now, again, another thing that I didn't see there, they didn't really tie in the actions. Maybe they did, but to me, I didn't see much of it. I didn't tie in, like to me, they were talking about the bridge, purchasing a bridge. They should have had lost, at least done maybe like a estimate of the cost of the bridge as compared to the HSE fines, right? So this is what I said. Sometimes I can see some weaknesses, and this is not that. This is something else they are talking about. That's about like a range of fines anyway. But I mean, they could have said that the bridge could have cost £20,000. I'm just making that up. And the fines, the least it could be is £20,000 as well. So maybe it makes sense to get the bridge because it's about the same as a fine. Well, one fine, like what if the company has a multiple fine? That's what you're seeing here. The fee can be way much more than £20,000, right? So I didn't quite see a tie in here. If you read up, you see for all actions, but it didn't seem to have much of a tie in there. In other words, like injured worker, sick pay, replacement, worker wages, medical costs, lost working time. To me, that should have been tied in to what they were talking about, right? Costs associated with enforcement actions. They should have been tied in, I think, to maybe if they did purchase or whatever they had said to do, that would have avoided those actions. Anyway, that's the idea there. See if you're okay with that. Moral, legal, financial is what you want to do. At least the order they had there is moral, financial, legal, It's the three of them anyway that you do have to talk about and sort of write extensively about it there to make up that word count. All right, questions on that one? So look at it with that mindset, moral first. Go back to your book. Like I said, I think you all had did a sample paper for me that had in it 10 reasons to 10 or 5, something like that, right? Reasons for a company having a moral duty to its workers then. So you could use some of the answers from that, from what I remember from the top of my head, and it's not too much there. I did see some, this is the paragraph they have, and I find this is still a very small paragraph, right? But we had things like, it's not part of your contract to endure suffering. We had things like society's expectation. The moral duty of care is actually not there in this paragraph. So I think that you could write a better paragraph than these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines here. Some things are mentioned here, but I think we covered way much work than that. Even direct and indirect costs, I think, could be a little bit more refined to reflect the actions that you're talking about.
So question,
Yeah.
Is it a summation for all the 3 points that we just listed, or is going to be separate for each point, a more reason for the first point? Financial.
I think based on looking at this, now why I say think, because in the other one it was a bit different, the format like for 4 months ago. But looking at this, it seems to be like a summary, right? In no way in this, and this is what I'm saying, this is a piece to me that, it isn't unique then to action 1 or action 2 or action. If you read it, you'll see that. I mean, it isn't moral, legal, and fine. No, I think that could work. I had a student who did do that. But again, this is before they have this little amendment to the format where you put action 1 and you put the moral, legal, financial. You put action 2, you put moral, legal, financial. You put action 3. To me, that is the way it should be done. But, I guess this is still new anyway, right? But based on what we are looking at here, Precious, I don't think there's nothing wrong with doing that, but what we're looking at here, they didn't do that here, right? And that's what I said, that they should have at least tied in action 1 somewhere here under moral and say that it would have been morally better for, I think they were talking about a bridge across a pit, right? When I say a bridge, like a ramp or something then, right? Across a pit. So they could have at least mentioned that and say it would have been better because workers' lives would be saved, and they did have it there. But that refinedness is not here. Maybe that is what is lacking, and there's nothing wrong with you putting it in. So I would say, yes, you can do that. I think that is going to be a little bit better than what you're looking at here. But what we are looking at here in this sample from NEBOSH, it's just like a summary of the 3 actions there anyway, right? And I did have a student, if anybody knew her, Amanda, who went on to pass anyway. And a couple of them that did that in the last one, that they did do it like that. And there's nothing wrong with it anyway, once the information was there, right? All right, so we're going down to action 1. So this would be fairly, I wouldn't say simple. I would also say though that what you really need here, I don't know if you remember this, but you should. What you really need for this piece, you need the guidance in your hand. You need the guidance, right? The guidance that was sent to you, you need the guidance in your hand. Because what you're seeing on the left-hand side is not all the requirements. That is just like where it's supposed to go then. But like in the guidance have actually what they want in specific legal requirements. In the guidance, it have what they want under likelihood and severity. So if you do not look at the guidance, I was telling you last week, our job is really to say if you're meeting the guidance. So you're not meeting the guidance, we are not the markers. But almost those students who don't look at the guidance, you'll find me having to copy and paste the guidance here, right here for you, like what was the requirement. So to save that back and forth then, to save, instead of waiting for me to copy and paste the guidance there for you, you have the guidance. Just look at it and you'll see what they want under likelihood and what they want under the severity, right? So don't just follow the lines you see in here, because as we are noticing today, some things may be missing from this. This is meant as an example, and this is not a knock on NEBOSH, but they probably know what I'm talking about, that they don't ever send you a perfect sample, right? So just get that out of your mind, right? This is a well-known, NEBOSH never sends a perfect sample, right? So before the pandemic, the sample they had, if that sample was marked and it was marked by NEBOSH, the best sample could have gotten like about 74, 75 marks. So it's not a perfect sample. We have one for the diploma as well. I think the best mark on the one for the diploma could have been about 68, 69 marks, right? So the bottom line here is that if you follow these lines here, you'll probably pass, but there are little things they're missing, right? And the guidance have what they're looking for under likelihood, what they're looking for under severity. So don't do it blindly, because you're gonna have to go back and do it again. Because all I will do is just copy and paste here and say that you did not put, like for example, in the severity, then like how much persons could be affected. You didn't put if this risk then affected the whole company or just one department, or those things are in the guidance. So, just save yourself the back and forth and save me the time as well, right? Because I am making it known that, that you do have to follow the guidance for this here, right? Anyway, based on our time, we could only look at one document, and you see it's almost going to 9:45, right? So I would not go back and forth. If we happen to finish, I would try to open the guidance and show you, but you may have it in your hand, you may have printed it. A good thing to do really is to print it and look at it as you go through the sections, especially part 3 here, what they are looking for, right? So the first piece is easy. You're gonna we did this before, you're just gonna rewrite, copy and paste that action that you chose and the hazard that you chose it from, right? So you have to say it back in the same words. If you had it on the table, like purchase a mobile bridge to allow mechanics to be able to safely access both sides of the inspection pit when working at ground level, right? Hazard category, work at height. So there's nothing wrong with following all this. Specifically legal requirements. So as I mentioned before, under legal, the part we just had, you may have mentioned the HSW Act, you may have mentioned the work at height regulation, but if you see here, they have gone down into the specifics now of the work at height regulations. Where would you get this from? The answer is your textbook, NG2 textbook. And those of us who, like I said, may be looking at this away anyway, it is this book, right? And you could, you could get the information from the internet as well, work at height regulations, right? All of those, that's what you did for me in one of your homework when you had gotten the regulations. Whatever the hazard is, remember those who were here anyway, and we were all here, it have our regulations for it. If it's work at height, you just put work at height regulations, and you want to sort of get a specific part of it then and talk about that, right? So the specific legal duties that NGG needs to meet under the work at height regulation 2005. There is a duty to ensure that work at height is 4A, properly planned, 4C, carried out in a specific manner in so far as is reasonably practicably safe, right? So they put the inverted commas, instructions are given to the workforce to walk around the inspection pit if they are working in the area, but these instructions are usually ignored. So this is again, this is the new format. I don't know what this is doing here, but this is how they want it. This is almost like the current controls now. Yeah, the current controls, which is which is what would have led you to say to purchase a bridge then, right? Workers would jump across the pit rather than walk around it, relying on instructions alone for something that could cause severe injury, example, falling into the inspection pit accidentally, would not satisfy the legal requirements for working safely. NGG Limited are therefore failing in this duty, right? So that's like like I said, a throwback to the current controls, right? Consideration of likelihood and severity, as I mentioned here. Okay, so let me just say that again. So where the law is coming from, it's coming from your book and it's coming from research on the internet, right? And you do have to give these specific requirements like, regulations 4A, 4C of that hazard. consideration of likelihood and severity. So let me just read it, right, for simplicity's sake, and I'll tell you what some people do and what you could do at the end of it. So you notice there's two things you have to talk about, which is the likelihood of the hazard occurring and the severity. And then you have to say like how high it is. Now, these that you would have chosen should have been the major ones, which is why we had said that these are the ones that could have saved a life then, or could have reduced a risk, right? So the likelihood of injuries occurring from working in and around the inspection pit is very likely. This is due to the inspection pit being in daily use, and most mechanics will work in this area at least 2 to 3 times per week for an average of 2 hours per job. I guess they went on to see how likely it is and why it was likely there. When considering the severity, I set 4 categories: minimum or minimal, no injury or damage occurred, minor, injury requiring first aid, major, injury requiring hospital treatment, catastrophic death, and or reparable damage to plant, equipment, and building. So what you're seeing here, for want of a better example, is the person attempting to quantify the severity by creating like a scale, right? Like minimal, minor, major, catastrophic. I did have some students again who did this before, and they use the risk matrix here. So you could use a risk matrix. There's nothing wrong with putting it here. You don't have to put the physical matrix, but you can put, you know, like 1, if you use a scale of 1 to 5, like 1 means no injury. If you just go on Google and you can find a risk matrix, you could just use that. You could use numbers if you wanted to. I had students who used numbers for likelihood and severity. They didn't do that here. They just said it was high or major. So the severity rating for this hazard being realized has been set at major. It is very probable that injuries will require hospital treatment, right, etc. Right? So something I'm not seeing there, which is, I know something was on the brief. So you could look and see if that is missing. Normally the brief had here that you need to say if this was widespread throughout the company, or if it was just for one department or one activity. As I said, you need to look back at the brief under here and see if you're seeing if there's anything missing from here then, right? The brief have these things like in bullet point form, kind of like this, like what you needed to have: the likelihood, the severity, the consequences. You need to put the consequences. So we see in consequences here. If you wonder where I'm getting that word from, that's from the brief. The brief have, you must say the consequences. You must give an idea of how high the risk is then, in this case, major. So they do have broken bones, head injuries, they do have damage to plant and equipment or something like that, right? Damage to equipment, right? And the brief also had here that you needed to say, just look and see if that is there still, right? If you needed to say if the risk was, anyone have it in front of them? I don't have mine in front of me. I normally do, but like I said, this has been a busy week anyway. If anybody have it, just check your brief and see if there is like a bullet point there. And if it's missing here, there's a line that used to say a requirement that you needed to say if the risk was widespread throughout the company or unique then to just that department, whatever that workshop was, right? So just double check that. Anyway, so the last piece of this here is that you have to suggest your controls. How effective are the actions likely to be in reducing the risk? This though, I like what they did here, that we put back. These things are from the brief. This one, they did it well. There were 3 things here. Likewise, there's a couple of things here. Again, like I said, I am not NEBOSH. They should have just put it in the bullet points right here for you all, right? That is how then we know we have to talk about the likelihood, the severity, the quantifying of the risk, the consequences, and if the risk is widespread, but they did not do it there. However, though, this one, though, if you have the brief and you're looking at this and the brief, you see it's the same 3 points they have. So you needed to say here, you need to say what is the intended impact of your action. Your action is purchasing the bridge. So the bridge will improve working practices in the area of the inspection pit, as it will stop workers from jumping from one side of the pit to the other side. So what some students do here, they actually, I know this person may have done it too, they probably didn't do it right in that same line. I'm looking for it. To me, they should have done it in that same line. Like they should have said that the bridge now would actually reduce the risk from major to minimal, and that's using their scale, right? Remember they said that the risk was major. Here they want to know what is the intended impact of the action. So you would say it reduced the risk from major to minimal. And if you had used a risk matrix and you had said the risk was 20, then you have to say purchasing the fire extinguisher. Let's make it something like purchasing the fire extinguishers and having persons trained to use them would reduce the risk from 20. And you can say what that means, maybe high risk to 12. From 20 to 12, which will be acceptable, right? So there's nothing wrong with putting that there. Again, that should have been there, right? As to how much the risk would have gone down by. Anyway, you do have the guide here. You need to justify the time scale that you indicated on your risk assessment. I'm not going to go up again. It's going to take me too long to scroll up, but justifying the time scale meant that the time you put to purchase the bridge, which would have been the time scale, you have to say, how feasible is that? Like, is that workable? Do they have the money? Do they have the manpower? So you have to justify the time scale, right? So I have given a time scale of 2 months. This is how it was on the table. As this is a specialized piece of equipment that nobody in the business has used before, the business would need to source a supplier and then arrange a delivery date. It is hoped that this project will be completed well within the 2 months timeline. And I guess this is it here, whether you take the action will fully control the risk, right? So this action will fully control the risk as long as the bridge is used. Again, here they may have said the minimal. So they did it here, right? Maintain and inspected as set out in the safe system of work that will be produced following the purchase, right? So they said it would reduce the risk to, well, they say fully control, right? If that is what they said, that's what they said anyway, right? But if you know a risk matrix, again, there's no such thing as, like zero risk. So there's still an element of risk again. But if you do use it in accordance with the instructions and the safe system of work, everything should be okay, right? So then that's the end of the first action. Well, I am not going to do the second one or the third, because you just have to do over what I said. So you're gonna list your second action. I will just give you the heading state, right? Give the hazard category, go through the laws. This one is COSH. All of these are in your textbook. Or you can just go to Google as how you all had done the regulations for me and put in what is the law for. This is a local exhaust ventilation system. It's going to be COSH regulation 7. You talk about the likelihood again, how likely you think it's going to be there. The justification for the severity, what they did here, they say use the same scale as for 1. Please see justification 1. So you don't have to go back and put another matrix. You could, whatever you use for the first action, you can say, refer to that. And then you come back and you say here, what was this action, by the way? I didn't even read this one. Enclose area to be set up for sanding, grinding operation, including a local exhaust ventilation system, which is like an extractor fan. We talk about the intended impact of the action, so it's going to reduce dust. The justification for the time scale, they're going to give that as well, right? That may be in this line here. I'm not seeing it. I have given a time scale of 6 months for this to be completed. And then whether you think the action would fully control the risk. Once installed, the dust enclosure alone would not fully control the risk, but will reduce it, significantly reduce it, right? So as I mentioned, if you're using numbers, fine. And then you do that a third time again, right? So you put your action out, you go through, find the law, give some details, go through likelihood. Again, for severity, they use the same scale. It's pretty much straightforward once you do one, right? And then we on to the last part. So let me just leave it here and then see if you have any questions again. And we're gonna go to part 4. Part 4, of course, is pretty simple. This is the hardest piece, folks, right? It's not hard, but it is long. You realize this is a bit longer than the table itself, and the table is pretty long. But this is not hard if you bear some things in mind that it's 3 actions you're gonna pull out. They can be from any combination of hazards. It's best to use 3 hazards though, right? Even if you choose 2 or tell it, it's not as if it's like if, okay, that you'll say that you'll get away then from pulling this out. No, you wouldn't get away. You'll have to still go and find a law and talk about it, right? So once you know it's 3 actions, you prioritize it. And then to the top of this, you had to do a moral, legal, and financial argument for all 3, whatever, like, I mean, according to Precious, if you wanted to do each one in turn, fine, but you must address all 3 in that first piece of this then, a moral, legal, financial argument for why the action should be implemented, right? We seem to be making good time apparently, which means we may finish a bit early. I didn't even know if I have my phone on the table here. Any questions? Just looking at one more time. Part 4 wouldn't take long. Part 4 would take 10 minutes for the most, if so long anyway. Anybody? Apparently some people are getting trouble with Zoom, but
Yes, sir.
yes,
One question.
Mm-hmm.
Through the entirety of the assessment, I realize the use of first person.
Yeah.
So is that like a requirement? You need to write in that format?
Yeah, I mean, you could. Nothing is wrong with it now, right? I mean, remember, NEBOSH have changed these standards from time to time, right? There used to be a time where, you know, like if you were doing even English in school, the teachers will tell you never to talk in the first person.
Yeah.
There used to be a time like that, right? Remember, I said I told our class I'm a bit of a young old person. This make about 20 years I'm teaching anyway. But it's like so for me it's not that long then, like in 2005, but that may be really long for some people. Yeah,
So
I mean,
you could use
so you can't use yourself. You could actually say the researcher, but no one really says that now anyway, right? Like the way we used to say it long time was like the researcher, which would be you, right? So the researcher, but they're not doing that. They have seemed to, the thing about NEBOSH is like one time they will say one thing and another time they go a complete 360-degree turn around, right? So it's okay to say it's okay to say, you know, I have done or I will suggest. So they are talking in the first person here, which was not part of the requirement years ago anyway, right? So it's okay to say that, so fine. Go ahead and, yeah.
The third person as well too. Refer to it as third person.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I don't think that's an issue here anymore, but I think what you see here, the person is saying, I am, you know, I will suggest, etc. So I guess that is okay anyway, right? But I mean, so there is no content questions, right? You all have an understanding of it because these things do take some time, as I mentioned, to at least to research them like this. But then this may be at least this may be this piece I'm looking, this may be a copy and paste, isn't it? This may be the person just copy and paste here, right? And this is nothing wrong with this because the person is given credit then. They are saying it's the Control of Substances Hazardous Health Regulation 2002. I mean, even if you type it, it's the same thing because this is in the inverted commas. This is the exact citation from the law. Ensure that the exposure of employees to substances hazardous to health is either prevented or where this is not reasonably practicable, adequately controlled. Even if you type it, it's still a dead copy of what the law have in it. So I think the trick would be to find it, and it's not a trick for you all because those who are here for the class on regulations and you all had found them so easy, admitting someone there, right? It's just to get, I mean, it's not a big passage, is it? It's just like 2 lines, and then you then say, you know, that this duty is not therefore being met. This is the throwback to the current controls, right? And again, they made mention of another law here, RIDO 2013, which this class haven't covered as yet, right? But those who may be like Kadeem there may have covered some of that on the previous classes, right?
So I have a question in terms of the referencing in the project, is there any special format that we need to use to like do the references like below for example, or we need to just write them out like how it's written here and that's fine?
From what I'm seeing here, you just have to write them out. The referencing piece, there was a piece about in the methodology where you saw they cited the guidance like HSG 264 or something, and they actually put the website. So that is how they cited it here, right? So no, there is no well, I mean that is a requirement, but if I get where Rouhani is coming from, they are specific citation for references, something called the Harvard style and the Vancouver style. That is not what we see in here, right? This is just basically you given the website and you citing the law, right? But at this level, I am not seeing and we have a lot of UE students here, right? A lot of folks who have a degree already. So if you know those referencing format I mentioned there, the Harvard style, that is not what I'm seeing here. So that is not what I would suggest to anybody. So if you know that format, good. You keep that for the degree anyway. The degree students do have to use that format. But on this certificate, I wouldn't say there is no format because they do have the website. It's just that that doesn't follow one of the more recognized formats anyway. Right? So some of you all understood that, right? Those of us who did references for
Yes,
your
sir, we
previous
understand.
degrees, yeah. So
Understood.
definitely not. This is not the Harvard style. This is not the Vancouver style. This is a style. Seems to be the NEBOSH style here for level 3, which is they are just given the website anyway. All right, folks, I want to try to finish up this fourth part, right? So the fourth part is very easy. It does consist of 3 pieces. And again, what I'll suggest to you is that you can use the guidance for the nitty-gritties of the left-hand column. Again, you notice that I showed it before. I'm not making this up. Sometimes apparently they've given you the requirement like what they did here. They could have done it right here too. If they could have given you this tree, they should have given you the tree up there too. And so that is making it a bit difficult that you have to go back to the guidance. And you should go to the guidance anyway, right? But if the aim was to have a holistic paper, then it should have been here, right? But so just look back at the guidance for these. And I would just tell you them anyway. You need to stick to the word count though. I have realized this one, especially the first one, people are given less than 50 words, right? So I guess that's the reasoning piece here, right? So let's go straight into this, right? So what you're gonna do here, you wanna give them when is the plan review date period with reasoning. So a lot of students will just give here and stop in the old scheme, right? And again, the old scheme is what, 4 months now, right? So company policy is to review risk assessment at least every 12 months. I therefore set the review date to be no later than the 13th of July, 2021. However, I will also make sure that this will be reviewed before this date. This is supposed to be read as if there is any new equipment or working procedures brought in, a change in relevant legislation and or standards, a significant change in the number of workers or to the shift pattern. So this is, you could think of this as a part of lesson 2 when we did policy, where if anything changes, you need to review your documents. And I think this well makes up the 50 words. The idea to it, sorry, but more than the 50 words, 50 to 100. But I said some students is to stop right here because it had plan review date. I guess this word here is new to this new amendment to the form, right? So the company policy date to review is every 12 months. So therefore you set the review date. And then you say maybe that you review it whenever there's a change. And they listed some change here, change in equipment, change in legislation, change in shift pattern. You could give some similar to that. Or you could look back at chapter 2 in your textbook. Under policy, you'll also find this in chapter 3 under risk assessments. You have to look for it in the NG1 textbook. Or you can just look at the slides. You have my risk assessment slides already. That is session 7. The last teaching session we had, and one of the last slides have when to review a risk assessment, right? How the findings will be communicated and who you need to tell. So not too sure if you're taking anything down on this side. Yes, remember if you had to take a bullet point there, you had to put the review date, you had to put the reasoning, and you had to put whenever you have changes, right? But you can look at your guidance, right? How the risk assessments will be communicated. Now, what you'll find here, I can give you two things here. What you'll find here is very important is who needs to know the information. And another concept here is that the means of communication is like verbal, and that class we did like verbal, written, and graphic. You can just put it in brackets somewhere here. If you read through this, you'll see that there is verbal things going on, but there's also like documented things going on as well here, right? So keep in mind how the risk assessment findings will be communicated could be verbally, but also via documentation then, which would have been written. Let's take a read of it, plus the who. So this is about the three big things here. The who needs to know, who you need to tell, right? So I will arrange a meeting with the finance director, that could be one of the who, to go through and assign the action in the risk assessment. I would then provide a summary of the findings and actions for the workshop and store managers. Again, that's who. These will be emailed initially with follow-up meetings if required. So that could be graphic and that could be also written, right? So the idea is that you have verbal, written, and graphic inside here. The finding of the risk assessments will be included in the next available toolbox talks. So that's obvious, right? That's verbal, right? Where I will also advise the workers on the actions that are to be taken. A summary of the risk assessment and actions to be taken will also be posted on the company's intranet that all workers have access to, right? So pretty much simple. Part 4 is kind of like in the bag. You just have to follow through this and you're good to go. The last piece of it, and again, follow the word count. This piece is 100 to 150 words. Sometimes, well, not sometimes. I mean, I do check the word count when you send it for me. And I have had to send it back. But I mentioned this before, I had to send it back here, like where students just had like a half line here that didn't even come close to 50 words, right? Again, we are not the markers, but if I see something like it's that off, then I would tell it just probably try to put in some changes in it or something, or when could the risk assessment be reviewed? Last piece, and we are finished. How would you follow up on the risk assessment and check that the actions have been carried out? So you can just take it from here. I will set diary reminders for roughly 10 days before the action is due to be completed. I will speak to the responsible person for each of the action to find out the progress against each action. Should the action not be on target for completion, I will find out the reason why. Example, is it down to finance or other resource issues such as worker time to complete actions? If any action looks like they are not going to be completed on time, I will speak to the finance director to see if additional resources is required for the action. Actions that are very overdue, i.e. completion is more than 6 months late, will be referred to the managing director via the finance director, which was the person ultimately responsible for safety, right? So the synopsis of the end here is that normally when you put things on the risk assessment, you have to follow up on it. Otherwise, they will never get done. So you find that the person is setting diary reminders 10 days before. If something has passed, and this is something common in companies, maybe the timeline for it has passed, then if it has passed, and this is a long time for it to be passed, this should have been reported to the director way before. Action plans are very overdue. Normally, if it's passed by a month, that should have been reported anyway, right? But 6 months late would be referred to the managing director. That's almost half the year. That's a sure way of not getting it done, right? So the idea is that you don't have to wait 6 months to report it to the bosses. Then if, you know, like if you go back up to the action I was talking about, this what they're talking about here is on the table. This is something like this then, right? So let me get a better one, right? So like monitoring systems to be set up to ensure that Vibration tools are not used for an extensive time, 1 month. Workshop manager. So this goes into another month that should have been reported then, right? That the workshop manager did not set up this monitoring system. So that's what they're talking about, and that's where you can make some sort of link here, right? See workshop manager, they already could find someone else. So that's it. I mean, if you have any questions, please ask. I'm just trying to show you one example of this anyway. One of these seems to be workshop manager, right? Training for mechanics on good hygiene, 3 months. Again, 3 months is a long time for training. For those of us who are thinking about these time scales, right? The longer you put to do something, that is a sure way of not getting it done, right? So just bear that in mind, right? Just be conscious of your time scales. Like if something was urgent, like how we saw, if something was high risk then, you know, like it's stopping in the worst places. I'm trying to use one from here, right? If something was urgent, right? Like someone could have been shocked or something. In this case, I think I used this one already, but I'll use this one again because that's where the screen stopped there, right? If something was like urgent and we said something could have killed someone, look at here, worst case scenario, death. Then if it's worst case scenario, death, right? Why are you waiting a month to do what you have to do? Why are we waiting, like why would you wait a month to check now the safe working load? Checking the safe working load is something easy to do for those who know safety. If it's a piece of equipment, it's probably marked on the equipment, right? It's one of the markings on the equipment is the safe working load. So if something could have caused death, right? You need to be conscious of these time scales that you all are putting here, because this could be done. And if it's something that simple, like checking, this is what they said, check the safe working load, that will take a month, that takes a day. And the time scale then should reflect the severity of what you're talking about here, right? If it was then something like housekeeping, I'm not too sure if this slide would stop on something like that. If it was something like housekeeping, something minor then, right? Something like minor, you could probably give it a longer time. It's something like cancer here. Why are they waiting 6 months to set up a maintenance program? A maintenance program isn't anything to set up, right? Those of us in safety, a maintenance program is in a week time you call someone to go and check your system, right? And if you know the risk is cancer, respiratory health condition, just be careful of this, right? In the real world, this, especially if it doesn't cost money, a maintenance program is not going to set up, right? To set it up and even maybe to call a specialist, they would probably charge, you know, like a day work or something to come and check your piece of equipment, right? So, you know, nothing more than like say about maybe $1,200 TT then, right? So sometimes when you put these long time frames, that's a way of saying that you're not really serious about that. Who will even consider this 6 months? If you say this from today, 6 months from now, would you even remember what you put here, right? So just be careful of that, right? Be careful of your time scale in terms of money, as well as if something is going to cost money, you should put that it's probably going to take a month or two, right? But to me, no way should something cost 6 months to set up, because the thing is, if workers could develop cancer, breathing problems, so it means that they have to suffer for the next 6 months. They have to suffer for the next 6 months, and you will do nothing for the next 6 months, right? So that's the idea behind that, folks. So if you have any questions, we are done. I guess I could, if you have any questions, I wanted to go on the recording because, again, students, like I said, may want to hear what you all are thinking about. I am done there for the morning. If we have any questions on what we said so far for today. It's a lot, so you're going to have to review it. I'm going to have to put up the video. Plus, remember, the other video is already online already. But 2 of them anyway, the original version to this, and then this sort of amended form anyway. Questions? Going once? Okay, so no questions? You seem to have one? Anybody else? Right?
With time in submission of this project.
Okay, just repeat, right? The rain is down in, at least in San Fernando anyway, so.
the timeline for submission of the risk assessment
For me or for NEBOSH? Or both?
for you?
I really haven't thought that far ahead. I think we were trying the idea of today's class and last week class, even though schools are closed, all schools are really closed, was that we kind of get a jump on it then, right? If you send anything around the Christmas time, I told you, and the Christmas time is all now, I would try to look up at some of these things like in the afternoon, right? But if we go back to the opening of this semester, which is the 9th of January, now once you send me something, I will look at it. Just remember that you mightn't get it the same day, but that's the aim. Then I've actually created a list. I know I have 2 names on that list already who submitted. Michelle, who is here, I think Michelle is here, would have already gotten her feedback because she sent hers early in the week. Remember, we left office this week on Tuesday, right? So if you sent yours a bit after that, I did see it. I know the names. I can call the names, but I wouldn't. You know who you are. You know the 2 is 1 male, 1 female, right? I'll look at those. I'll try to look at 1 tonight and maybe 1 tomorrow night. So if we look at the opening of this semester, the 9th, remember your exam is carded to be February the 3rd, they say. And what they normally do with the project, just be careful what I'm saying here that you understand is, they normally give you all the week after, this is NEBOSH, they give you the week after the project to submit. But if you want me to see it as a draft, then what I think may be a good practice may be, you know, I wouldn't say there's a cutoff day, because if you know me, I look at them then. I wouldn't say to the very end. If you send me the day when it's due to NEBOSH, well, then I can't look at it. But I'm not going to give you a cutoff date, right? The idea is if the sooner you do it, the better. Or this, I'm not going to give you a cutoff date today, right? I think if you want a cutoff date, it means that something may be wrong with your sense of planning. What I'm telling you all is that the sooner I get it, the better, because you can get back your comments on it. But to say that, just say if I give a cutoff date, then some of you will think, well, if he says the 30th, does that mean that I cannot submit after the 30th? Yes, you could submit. I would still look at it, right? So let me leave any official dates for next year, all right? When we start a new semester. For now, I would say, go with the guidance of once you do it, send it. Once you even do part of it, send it. Do even do the whole thing. Send part and let me see it. You know, I should stop the recording. Yeah, this piece is not making sense to the folks who may not be part of our class.